Welcome to the Find Your Voice, Change Your Life podcast with psychologist Dr. Doreen Downing. Listen in as Doreen interviews people who felt they didn't have a voice or who suffered extreme speaking anxiety. You'll hear stories about how they struggled to speak up, what they did to find their authentic voice, and the confidence they now feel to speak up and make an impact. If you want to get started right away to find your voice, download Doreen's free 7-step guide to fearless speaking at doreen7steps.com. And now, here is Doreen.
Hi, this is Dr. Doreen Downing. I'm a psychologist, and I'm host of the Find Your Voice, Change Your Life podcast. And when I invite guests here, I open up the platform to have a conversation. It's very spontaneous, unscripted, although we both know that what we're here to do is to share with listeners a story. And today I have Kyomi O'Connor. Hi, Kyomi.
Oh, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Doreen. I'm so excited.
Yes, well, I am well aware of your story. You did some program with me, and we'll hear more about what the impact of doing the Find Your Voice program with me was. But I want to first read a bio that you gave me some details about who you are and where you come from. Kyomi O'Connor is the author of the multi-award-winning memoir. Isn't that wonderful? Multi-award-winning memoir, A Sky of Infinite Blue, a Japanese immigrant's search for home and self. In the book, Kyomi describes her spiritual journey to overcome, heal from childhood emotional abuse, and move forward to find light in every adversity in her life. Her husband, Patrick, became critically ill in 2013 with metastatic melanoma in his brain. And after a fierce battle, he passed away 3 years later. And in deep grief, Kyomi began writing, and eventually it became her book. Kyomi still lives in San Diego with her 2 cats, Tommy and Omi, enjoys yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong, walking, and photography. And she writes weekly on Substack about healing from trauma, the power of adversity, the richness of diversity, and living in clarity, wisdom, compassion, and transformation. When you hear that, what goes on for you when you hear me read back some of your accomplishments and your passion?
I've been always a learner. Of course, I appreciate the award and other accomplishment, but I am just in the flow of moving forward all the time. So I don't feeling like attached to it.
Wonderful. That's part of it. Seems like one of your spiritual teachings is that we don't get attached to something. And just because you've accomplished it doesn't mean that defines who you are. And I love that word flow. I've always felt that with you is the openness of allowing life to flow through you and being willing. So, hello, let's start because as a psychologist, I always like to begin with some of that early childhood stuff, you might say. And I know that you mentioned it in your bio about emotional abuse. Let's just start with, obviously, that has a story behind it. So
Yes.
what do you have to say?
Yes, I was bullied by my own father and also paternal family, his mother and then his brothers and sisters and wives, and they also had bullied my own mother. So when my mother and the father got married, a very short time, like for 1 year, they lived with a parents' house. So during that time, my mother was very badly bullied, and she has a very pure heart and then, very kind. But since she was bullied, and somehow I was categorized as a mother's child because I was a very empathetic child. from a very early age, 3-year-old, I was always looking after my mother. It sounds very strange, but I was looking after my mother. She was physically, mentally quite sensitive. And she was in the bed a number of days a week. So I was always helping her. And then particularly after my younger sister was born when I was 5-year-old, I was looking after both younger sister and also my mother, changing the diaper and then, even fixing some milk all the time. And my mother rely on me. We have a very weird dependency to each other. And so I had almost no boundary between mother and myself. And so I become totally like her. I had a very different personality, very independent, almost like very bubbly personality in myself. But somehow I become her. And then I was bullied as my mother was bullied, like, oh, you are mother's child. And my elder sister, 2-year older sister, was categorized as classified as my papa's child. And then she was always in like sitting on a throne. And then she even used me as like a servant. So I was always looking after house, small stuff all the time. And then my elder sister never touched any fabric to clean the house or anything. I do all the time.
Well, Kyomi, already we get a very descriptive image of what it's like to come into this world as this fresh spirit, this bright spirit, and then a mother who is wide open with need.
Yes.
And you responded to that need, and then the sister having that special kind of, I like that image you had of her being on a throne, but being her servant. So, hello, where's little Kyomi? She's lost in all of this, this identification and dependency and being bullied because you had this, I don't know if I would call it a special relationship with your mother, but in essence, the being bullied. And no, it's just not a rich, nourishing environment for a little one to grow, is it?
Yes, and then at the beginning of a bullying, the being bullied, I felt maybe accident. What happened? I didn't understand it because I was 3.5-year-old, and then it becomes prolonged and then repetitive, and then start to feel I must be wrong. I started to even criticizing myself, and I felt like so shameful and then guilty. My existence was so tiny, but again, my original personality was very bubbly and then bright and to like extending everything outwardly. And now the bullied little Kyomi felt so introverted, and I felt I didn't love myself. I was torn apart because I didn't know what to do. And then the only thing I do was criticizing myself. I hated myself. Eventually, to live in this world, I have to set up my 2 different personalities, almost like wearing armor, protective armor, or without armor. So I was pretending just to be a bright girl. Even I was bullied, I pretended I didn't get hurt and I was okay, and I move on. But deep inside, I was very...
Oh my goodness. Oh, I'm going to pause right there because I want people to really get what you just talked about, the armor and the protectiveness of that. And yet inside, how vulnerable you felt. Also, this whole, oh my gosh, inside there's self-doubt, self-hate, and all that. When we have armor, it's also locked in there. The way we feel about ourselves, the negative self-talk.
Yeah, I felt so much limit. Like I was like a trapped into the imprisonment, but I couldn't get out. I was afraid to come out because of the what's going on in the emotional abuse, and I didn't find where I should exist. And then on top of it, I don't want to say anything really bad about my mother. However, in fact, she was a very kind woman, but she was very weak. Her identity, she didn't have a sense of independence, but I did. So that's why sometimes even the bright Kyomi, little Kyomi, but like a positive one, try to perform perfectly, but sometimes I couldn't perform perfectly. I had an episode when I was kindergarten, first grade kindergarten. I had a cultural festival, very first time we celebrated like autumn together. And then we have a small skit chosen kindergarten, like 10 people shared some short with total 10 people making a good story, short like an animal or some heartwarming kind of a story. I had a few sentences to recite, and I made a mistake. I was so nervous, and I made a mistake. But that day, my mother almost never hold my hand or anything, and then I felt very badly betrayed. So that happened point of my life, a very important point of life. She had done some kind of betrayals, and I got even more hurt.
Right. So I'm getting that as you develop as a young girl, we're moving out of childhood into young girlhood, and you're at school, and here you are performing and you make a mistake, and it's just so, I mean, it's already embarrassing for us, but then not to get support from a parent and just to be
Right.
criticized. Well,
Yeah.
let's move on through your young adulthood, and we already get a sense of what you bring into adulthood is the sense of armor and this not a very, well, I guess you might say it's low self-esteem is the way,
Right.
most psychologists term it. But you also, there's some kind of hint I get that always you knew inside there was, but it was deep. It was so deep, it was almost accessible.
So I know I was deeply hurt, and then I carried that hurt Kyomi, little Kyomi, very hurt until I think late 20s. And then early 20s, actually teenage, when I decided my school for university, I had a really bad argument with my father. So my father wanted me to go to medical school, but I wanted to become a journalist for a very long time. And then for my teenage, I read lots of books and then write. He knew I am a very sensitive and a very empathetic person. And then he was so afraid if I become a journalist, I may be killed, or I may commit suicide or whatever, because I couldn't accept probably, the problems in the society in general. I was too pure, and like he was so against it. But the way he brought up was so powerful, and then just almost like thrashing me, and then I don't exist, and I have to obey. I had my strong myself in me, but when he told me like that, all of the history of being abused all of a sudden exploded, and then in Japan, talking back, or like arguing with father was a big taboo. It's like socially not accepted.
Definitely. Well, we're talking about voice, and you did not have a voice, right?
Yes. But as I spoke, I was totally thrashed out, and then like I went to deep end. And then until early 20s, I couldn't recover. I had a multiple thing. It hurt me like a very fast boyfriend. I didn't have any physical relationship or anything. I was already almost 20, but I never had any physical experience. But I loved him very much. But somehow the broke up, So I'm pretty sure that precipitated my, darkness, definitely affected to react to what he said or what he's done or whatever. I could have been a little bit more adult, but I couldn't accept anything anymore. And then I basically burst out, and then going deep end, and then early 20s, I attempted suicide, but failed.
Well, yeah. I just bless the universe for bringing you back from that deep, dark moment, and that you didn't disappear then, and that you got to come through it and be here today. And well, you have way more to your journey, I know, because your book is definitely, like I read in the beginning, about your journey with your husband. And I know that because you two came to the United States, moved here, I don't know where you met him, but
I met him at the NIH. Even a very darkness I held inside, I did academically or socially, practically, I was doing pretty well, because I had an armor to protect me.
Yeah.
I had a duality of life, managing pretty well till, I decided no more. I escaped from Japan, and I came to the States. I got invitation from NIH to work as a postdoctoral researcher. I have a background as a dentist, but I went to graduate school for research, basic research. That took me to NIH. Yeah.
Is that where you met Patrick?
Yes. This is a so interesting story. When I left Japan, even before I came to States, I asked my boss to be in the future. I want to have a studio, kind of a furnished studio, just only 2 months. And then 3 months thereafter, I want to share the house or apartment with real American people. That's what I was hoping. So originally, I asked my boss to organize before I came, just furnished a studio for these 2 months. And then I did. And then toward the end of the lease, I started to look around homes. And then at the 23rd home I visited, I liked the house, and he was a tenant.
Oh,
so he was a British cancer researcher. He was also a resident in the house, and then I decided to live there. And then the American owner and then wife, they left for early vacation, end of May to like August, the beginning of July. And so almost 1.5 months they are absent. That's the period of time Patrick and I became closer.
Closer. We know what that means. Well, Kyomi, why don't you, as briefly as you can, because I know it's a long, long story about his illness and your being somebody who was there every single moment, it seemed like. So the best you can, just tell us that story about your husband's, what he faced, but more about what you faced being his caregiver.
Yeah. Patrick and I met in 1990, and I moved to the house in March of 1990, a couple months after I moved to the States. And then get closer, and eventually we move out, and then we got married 3 years later. But both Patrick and I are working at NIH, but while I was there, I started to feel, because originally, when I escaped from Japan, I was still wounded inside. And even I decided to change my life, but still wound was there from the past. But Patrick was very kind, and he lavishly poured out his unconditional love to me. He was so supportive. I have to live very practically. And then I have to start from the scratch in the States, the practicality, and then I have to live in a clarity more and more. And then I become more resilient and then practical. So that made me to feel I need to stay in this country, not just only, tenant, but I will be married with this guy and we are building the life here. So I have to be even serious about my career and everything. So I decided to return to dentistry. And then through that process, I basically asked my father to help me 2 years financially, Patrick and I. Basically, before even ask my father, the healing was already there. I would never, ever ask my father to even financially help me. That was a great surprise. How could I do this? But that big difference between pretty badly bullied to ask something.
Being assertive.
Yes. Then 2 years he helped, and then at the end of a residency program, I became licensed, and then even was accepted for the university position. And then my father became terminally ill, and he passed away a few months later. During that back and forth in a few months, I become a kind of catalyst for the whole family with my father to reconcile. So I went back and forth with Patrick or without Patrick many times to Japan. He was totally estranged before then, but before he passed away, we become in one. So, but anyhow, before he left this life, this world, he left me teaching, Buddhist teaching. I was quite shocked at the beginning, but as I experienced the Buddhist teaching, that was so amazed. I was amazed and so profound. I don't usually easily get, even though my father said, I don't just go whatever. But I was so moved how profound it is. And then Patrick and I moved to San Diego and then started to practice Buddhist teaching and then become such a wonderful, fulfilling. Our relationship become finer and then like almost like a see-through. We can see through ourselves. And we helped a lot of community people in the spiritual community. And so we become basically a leader in the teaching too. But Patrick started to show a little cognitive problems around 2011. And I knew something is wrong. And then finally, he fell critically ill 2013, summer of 2013. And then was a metastatic melanoma. Original prognosis was a few months.
He lived for 3 years.
Yes. So because of the advancement of medicine and also my caregiving.
Yes. Yes. Your caregiving.
Yes, I was so much devoted. I was so afraid that if I die before him, what's going to happen to him? That was the biggest fear I carried.
Then he did pass away 3 years later. Talk a little bit about the journey to find your voice in your writing, because it seems like that's where you started listening to what was going on inside of you more.
Yes. So after I came to States, I become very much myself, right? But while I was caregiving him, I noticed, because almost like a so rapid roller coaster all the time, and I have no room to do anything else but just to focus on the care. And at that time, I have to put the vulnerable myself on the side.
Yeah.
And I pretended really, I can do this, warrior, I have to do this. Kept doing for 3 years. And then after that, boom, he passed away. And I was totally shattered. Because I was pretending I'm being a warrior, but a warrior has nothing to do anymore. I lost totally. My identity was totally crushed. And who am I? And then while I was, going back to the temple and being with the spiritual community, the people from community, I was pretending I'm okay, but I wasn't okay. When I'm alone, I was wailing, literally crying aloud, home, alone. And then I was so hot. So then all of a sudden, I realized what I'm doing. I am doing exact the same as the way I did, little Kyomi did.
Oh.
And then the duality was totally kind of in front of me. I was doing exact same. I thought I was healed, but it wasn't. So residual part of me came up almost like a habit. Once it becomes a critical situation, it comes out like a habit. And then I decided to look into this. I have to find my own truth. I have to reclaim who am I. So I started to write because originally I was leaning onto writing, right? So I thought, maybe to find me.
Right, journalism. That's right. Good point.
So finding me, I think the writing is the best. And I started to write. Oh, that was very hard. I cried. I was almost tearing up because at the beginning, of course, so emotional. I was so vulnerable, and then I was deep in grief. But I was like a warrior. Warrior part of Kyomi came out, and I have to face this. I'm going to do this. I was so driven to finding the truth. I really need it. Then as I do, little by little, eventually, I start to find light in every adversity I experienced. And then the light is like stars. And it gathered into me, like it's all connected.
Oh, yes. Well, this is beautiful. This whole idea of rather than the armor and the warrior protecting you and protecting what's inside, you use that same kind of energy to say, I'm going on a quest, you might say, right? Or a journey inside of myself to face the truth. And then when you started facing the truth, you learned so much. Well, when we met in my course, you were at a different point. The book had already been written, and yet there was some leftover sense of still hiding of still more discovery to make. What was that?
Yes, I really appreciate your course, Essential Speaking, because when I met you, I already finished the book, and almost like 95% of myself was feeling like liberated, and I was fine. But just before I started to write that book, first memoir, I had a incident with my family. Very first time when I visited Japan, 3 months after my husband passing, we went to hot spring. And then in a dressing room, this is a part of a second book, but so when I was in the dressing area, I usually don't want to show my body to anyone, even a family member. But hot spring, you have to be totally naked. Everybody goes into the really huge bathtub, right? So in the dressing room, myself and my mother was left behind. My sisters and my nieces went to hot tub. And then I was like kind of a shy and hiding, but my mother all of a sudden grabbed my shoulder and said, "Oh, it must be very hard. I can tell from your body how it changed." That's she told me. So I felt all of a sudden hit by my mother's love. She had that love, but I couldn't take it any longer after I committed suicide, suicide attempt. She was the one triggered my attempt.
Mhm.
And since then, I totally shut the love I held very long time, the big love. And she showed me the big love too. Put into the small wooden box, and I put it in the bottom of the ocean trench. And then I was hoping never ever come out. And but all of a sudden, when she touched my shoulder and then said a few words, it become like an explosion of like an earthquake, and then all of the bubbles from the ocean trench coming out to the sun, and then the wooden box came out. So
Yeah.
I knew I have that hidden part. Still, even I finished the first book, but I do holding it, still holding. So unless I find really the truth in here, I can't speak in the public like a publication involved the launching parties or whatever. I'm too honest, maybe too honest to be telling a lie or like showing off myself. I'm not that kind of person. I just wanted to be so truthful, transparent. So that's the reason I went to your course. And then toward the end, I really find my love and my mother's love. And then everything dissolved like.
Oh, yes. When you say the love, I think that the love has a voice, because that's what we're talking about too. It's not just a sensation, but and it's not like a voice from somebody to you. It's just the sound, I guess, the voicing of love, I think, is how I
Yeah.
might describe what I just heard from you. Oh, that's beautiful, Kyomi. I know that we're coming to an end, so I want to move to a place in which you feel like you've given what you wanted to my listeners today. And is there something else that comes through you if you were speaking to listeners? Because you are, it's not an if, you really are. What is the message you want to leave them with?
There's some people say cliche, but it is love. I think we all need love. This is the best and then last commonality we do share in humankind. I think humanity needs this love, and then all creature, the globe, everyone needs this love. So we have to return to this and then trust our potential, how much more we can create out of love.
Oh, that's so, so beautiful. Thank you so much, Kyomi.
Thank you for being with us today for this episode of Find Your Voice, Change Your Life. Each person Doreen interviews shares what has helped them find their voice. You can learn from these guests and find your voice so you can be confident to speak up and speak out. And remember to download Doreen's free 7-step guide to fearless speaking at doreen7steps.com. We hope you enjoyed the show and will return next time. Until then, goodbye for now.